configurations and deployment. So for the on-premise, we are discussing it. So first step is we have to go and find the relevant apps for which our landscape we are intended to configure. Then comes, we how to identify whether this is suitable to customer scenario or not. If customer is running on cloud product, you have to pick the whether this product is supports to cloud or whether it supports to ERP suite. So you need to check for the product compatibility. So here, if you see, if you have taken example of plan customer projects, it says that it needs S4 HANA Cloud. This application is meant for S4 HANA Cloud. So we need to ensure that for which kind of application is it and how exactly how to use. So we understood one thing, like transaction apps, any database is fine. So in this case, if customer does not have HANA database, also it is fine. So these checks etc. will try to rule out by checking at the basic information of what kind of backend we need, what kind of if they are on S4 HANA product on cloud or on-premise, then all the Fiori apps etc. are supported. So that is one basic check. And here they'll specify, so it is accessible on both desktop and tablet and not on phone. If you see in which all landscape this is applicable also will be mentioned. So every project, standard Fiori app or custom Fiori app will have unique app ID. So this will be created by in their system. For in our case, we have to give our unique ID. So this is the single shot how we'll rule out whether it is compatible or not. Next comes checking the front end server and back end server components. So yesterday we have seen in ES5 system, right? So whether it is S4 HANA 2020 edition FES version was there. So we have to check for these particular components are available or not. So in case of cloud, everything will be taken care. See, if it is S4 HANA cloud product, all the apps will be, if you subscribe to for Fiori apps cloud, Fiori cloud, SAP Fiori cloud, then all the subscription will be taken care by SAP. Whereas for the on-premise, we have to ensure that we are on the right, support pack, etc. When I say support pack, in this case, they specify specific version as such. So we'll see one example. And similarly for the OData services, etc. Also, what are the minimum backend products? What products are required? Suppose if it is a HR-related application, we have to see whether HR-related components are available or not. So we have to connect to the right backend system. So that is what we check for the stack check. So whether it is front end and backend stack check are are relevant for our use case or not. If you're picking an application where your existing customer does not have those particular products within him, so we cannot or we should not actually suggest in first place itself. Then the final and last step would be going to, we have two transactions. One we call it as SICF for activating the applications, and we have IWFND main service to activate OData services. So these are the two transactions which we use to activate the application. So this is a UEFI application name. So this is the name of the application. When you go to SSFT code, you can either search with this name or you can search with this path. So both options we can search and we can activate. And likewise, the OData service also will be activating it. So these three steps, by doing it, we'll be able to identify that Fiori app is compatible or not, and we can install it. So let me show you quickly. So now if we take one example, so I'll take timesheet application. So first and foremost, what we do is we search for timesheet. Now we check, here they're like, we have Lighthouse in us. I said Lighthouse are, specific to some core, they are meant for S4 HANA product, etc. And you have, if you check for this manage timesheet, you click on this, it says it is meant for HR related module, and this is meant for manager or employee. They're clearly specifying it is meant for employee. If you see, they mention that it is meant for S4 HANA cloud, and it is a transaction lab request HANA database. So all the checks are we are able to do, and it's compiled for all the three devices, be it phone or tablet or desktop, any landscape again. So if customer is on S4 HANA cloud, then we can pretty much suggest him to, instead of my timesheet application, we can ask him to use manage my timesheet, because Lighthouse apps are specifically meant for S4HANA. So there are like two applications you have. See, if you see, there is one more called My Timesheet version 2, 3, 4, etc. You have it. Okay, in this case. Okay. Why do you have these many are based on the product you are in. So if your customer is on S4HANA Cloud, this is the application we recommend. If you check My Timesheet now, see, I just try to identify the difference in this case. It says it is meant for SAP Business Suite. That means it is for the meant for ERP product. So that's the difference. You're able to identify it. So you have multiple applications and how you are able to filter out which is the right Fiori application for your customer. So this is how you'll identify. And in this case, if you see the backend product, it says as SAP ERP. So and it is compatible on any database. If you see on the other hand, for the My Timesheet, it shows as HANA database because all S4 HANA comes with HANA database. And whereas for ERP, like I said, we need not to go with any HANA database. We can have Oracle DB or anything. So this is a quick check we'll do. And similarly, if we same application, now we talked about employee. Do we have any approving scenario for a manager which application they have to access? So for that we have something called approve timesheet now. So this approve timesheet, so the use case has been split into two scenarios. One meant for the employee and one meant for the manager. So you have to configure both the applications. If you see again approve timesheet in this case, this is for meant for it mentioned clearly that it is meant for manager and you have a required backend product as SAP ERP. So again, if for all the ERP products and transactions, like I mentioned, it can have any database. You're able to relate right now. So how do we have the two different scenarios and how which is the right application we are identifying. Now let's check out for this version 2. If you see, now you got an option of selection of multiple, see the same in version 2. Here it is backend product is S4HANA. You're seeing, right? This is on-premise. So this one which we saw initially was meant for cloud. And the one which we saw here, My Timesheet is meant for ERP product, and this is meant for S4HANA. Within S4HANA, we have S4HANA again for if you select Business Suite, etc. So this is ERP one. So that is exclusively meant for older application meant for ERP. In this case, two versions are there. So both it is compiled for ERP. There is one application. So if you follow the implementation information for Business Suite, that means within SAP ERP, there is one application, and for the S4 HANA, we have another application. So you can filter out each application directly. If we have the same application is compatible across two or more environments, you can have to filter out for which product you are trying to install. Now, in this case, this is the latest in April timesheet. This is older application, and you have mandatorily these particular landscapes. So Business Suite, if you opt any database, it works because it's a transaction scenario. We need not to, there's no dependence of any whether it should be HANA or etc. Let's check out the third April timesheet, which is version 3. So in this case, some of the applications they have maintained this, but generally versions these many duplicate copies you will not have because of the drastically the features have changed, etc. If you see here, the features etc. completely changed. Okay, the how it looks. So they had to maintain different versions because SAP has to support older customers. If still some customers are still using old one, and you cannot actually stop support for that. So that's the reason they'll have always multiple versions available. So now you saw here same for the version 3 as well. You have different backend product and respect to things. Now let's go into details. So for product features here, they'll clearly articulate what all you can do using this application. So here it is meant for already approved timesheet you can see, and manager can approve etc. and they can check additional details. So you'll have a quick snapshot of how the Fiori application looks. So this is how your approved timesheet will look, and details of the what are the now in this case Williams, when he clocked etc. those information we're able to see in this application. So by looking at it, we can directly approve the timesheet records. So in a month, if you missed out or anything also you'll come to know, and you can accordingly drop him a mail stating that he is not yet compliant. So directly you can click on this email and you can send a mail that he is not yet compliant. So this is how it makes you, within 2 clicks you'll be able to access it. So let's see how do we implement it. So you have to go to implementation information, and here specifically we have to identify within S4 HANA. Now if customer is on which release, so S4 HANA latest is 2020. So in that service pack is 01. Okay. So you have to filter out whether S4 HANA within 2020 afterward they release one, service pack 01. So likewise, if your customer is on older product, so generally it is like every year one new version kind of you will tend to see. So 2020, this is 1909 was accordingly you can consider implemented in 2019. If customer implements some 2 3 years back, etc., if they are yet to upgrade, then you'll have older versions as well. So always for every up version will be supported, but the implementation steps, etc., certain notes, etc., might change, so you have to follow the latest one. So now in our case, I'll just log into this system. So we log on to our front end system. So in this case, our ESY system is front end for us. So let's do the quick check of the details which we are sent. So now once what we have to do, we have to go to system, then we have to check for the status. So here we'll be able to see which database, etc. See one point which yesterday I was wasn't clearly articulated was, see in both in the front end and back end system we'll have the database system, but the business data would be stored only in our backend system, not on the front end system. The front end system, the database which we see is only meant to deploy our Fiori apps. So only the app and registration roles, etc., everything would be available in the this particular database, and no business data. Business data always resides in our backend system. So that point you need to understand. So because you'll find database in both front end as well backend system, but this does not contain any business data. So that point you need to understand. And the product version specifically, and this is very key area while you try to see. Now for specifically, now if we select S4 HANA 2020, or which one we have to select. So how do we identify this? Based on the install product. Now if you see the install product here, it is SAP Fiori S4 HANA 2020. So we have to pick not FP S01, we have to pick S4 HANA 2020. So if it has any service pack, if you see here, this says initial shipment pack, not the later. So if it says as initial shipment pack, this is the first part. So after this, there was a security patch release that they have called it as FPS01. So in our product is S4 HANA 2020. So this is how you'll find out what is the right uh, SAP product installed on your customer landscape. So in our case, we have identified that this is 2020. Now fast check is done, right? So now you go into it. So one more area is if any bug fixes, etc. So if you're already implemented approved timesheet and customer is using and you face certain issues, so regularly SAP starts shipping notes, and where is the official way to look for this particular application specific? You need not to go anywhere, directly specific to application. Every application they'll say this is a general note, and this is for the specific to the Fiori apps, anything are there, then here it will be mentioned, and specific to the OData services backend, etc., anything is there will be separate notes. So you can directly check out these notes to see any if any standard fixes SAP has provided not. So this is the first part we do. Next comes 3 areas: installing, configuring, and extensibility. Installing is for the first time when you're doing it, we'll do these steps. And if you wanted to extend the functionality, suppose in the approved purchase order, now we wanted to add one more called phone number or something. So in this case, you have phone number and email, you have it. Maybe if you want to include some, what is his employee ID, etc. So then we can have to check the extensibility area. All the fields which we see in the OData service, when we are interacting with the table, corresponding table for this particular, there could be 10, 20 fields. But in the UI, we will not always show all the fields. So if it really makes sense to have that particular field, then only we'll use it. So additional fields will be still available in the table, but we'll not use it. So if customer needs those fields, we can use extensibility concept and we can further tweak the applications as well. These are, those extensibilities are specific to individual customers. Suppose if you are implementing it, this application is meant for all the global SAP customers. So the changes which you do would be affected only for your customer landscape. So such areas we deal with in extensibility area. Okay. So now I'll go to installations step, and here we'll check for front end component. In the front end component, product required is SAP Fiori S/4HANA 2020. Already we have ensured that it is it. And support package is initial. And software component. Here, if you see, there are like two components here. So every software component is nothing but, for UEFI apps, we need something called SAP_UI. That is a software component. For OData services, we need something called GWFND. So that is gateway foundation components. Okay. So in this case, this is a version which is required. So you have to go here and you have to come and check in software component version. Okay, so here it will specify you. If you see SAP_U, if I'll expand this. So if you see, there are like two components here, SAP_UI. So this corresponds to the UI, all the UI add-on. So if this, that's the reason I was saying, if you are on 7.5.1, 7.51, etc., all by default you'll have these both components. But if you're not running on old ERP, etc., you have to ensure that you are having this UI component as well as gateway component. So in the architecture we have seen, right, these two are essential for our Fiori apps. So in this case, we have to check whether we have this software component, etc. And which particular version, if you see, we have already these all prereqs. Similarly, for the backend also we have to check. So in this case, for us, both front end and backend are the same. But you have to ensure that your backend also, it's your is on the same version as such. So in this case, the recommend what version there it has to be is SAP S/4HANA 2020 itself, and it should have a software component version of the GBX01. So this particular components we have to go to the respective front end and back end. So the back end part you have to log on to your, if in Central Hub, you have to go to back end and we have to log in and we have to similar step we have to do. We have to check the installed product and then we have to check the installed software component. Clear? So once we do that, then comes the configuration part.
Yes.
If you okay, so here if you see, this mentions SAP UEFI application, and they give the application name and they give the path. Like I said, we'll go now to SACF transaction. So I'll go to, so we can close this now. I'll go to SACF. So this is all the applications are available throughout in the system, be it custom applications or standard applications. All the applications we'll find it in this part. Either you can use, if you are using service application name is nothing but service name. If you are using path, you can copy the path and place it in the service path field, right? And you can just do execute. Okay, so here we do not have HR specific modules, so we might find the older application. So this is a demo system, so in all the modules etc., they'll not be using it. So we can check for this default node. What I'll do is I'll go to the default node to show what all apps are available in this particular configuration. So I'll use service path here. And then I'll remove this is application name. If you see, if you just leave it this way, so we'll go to this node. So in this node, if we see, this is, it says that namespace for SAP UEFI applications. If you expand this, you'll find all the apps which are available already in this particular system. By default, if you see there are like go down. So these are our application itself. They are meant for different parts. Let me check if I have my timesheet for the HR one. Fiori app for EPM model. So, the Z applications, if anything, we have. So if you see now currently, I think what are which are configured already in this case. So we'll not be able to find. There is right now we don't have HR module as such. So if you see here, we are specific targeting HR module, right? So HR module components also should be there. So in our case, we don't have this is in dummies. I mean this demo system, all components will not be available. So no, currently the what are in the launchpad are configured, right? So all those applications will be available in our demo system. So we'll be able to see those. So these are not actual Fiori apps. These are designed only for the demo system. So these are not actually. So one we are seeing the procurement. These are like samples only. These are not actual Fiori applications. So if purchase are like this is a simulation of some example. If you see here, you have managed products. So if you see this application, SA Fiori approve purchase order or you page products manage is nothing but this particular managed products, right? So in this case, this particular application here you'll find, so all the Z ones are nothing but they are like custom applications. All the UF applications which start with either Z or Y, so they are all Z applications. And when we deploy also, we deploy into this particular node itself. Now how do we activate? So you select the application, on the right click it, you have either activate or deactivate. So here it's already activated. So that's the reason we are able to access it from the launchpad. Once you activate, they'll be available on your launchpad. Okay. So you have to right click this. In this case, either you can deactivate it or you can activate it. Okay. And provided we have the authorization. So in this case, in this demo system, they'll not provide us authorization. In order to have authorization, something called we have PFCG role. PFCG role, what it does is it gives us the admin rights to activate or disable, etc. So basis will be providing us the necessary for if you are an admin, then we generally have the authorization. So once we have authorization, all we have to do is we can have to activate it, and we can click on test service. Then the standalone application will run. So how we are running from the BAS or Visual Studio Code preview application. So likewise, directly this will run from the server, SAP server. That is, we are running from our local copy, whereas in this case, it will run this way as a standalone application. So it is once if it is running properly and you are able to see, then it is good. Now at this stage, application will be running, but you will not see any data. Reason being is you haven't yet activated your OData service. So that is one check. Now second part, how we do is now like I said, now we understood that we have to activate this application. Now similarly, OData service, we have to go to, if you see here, they mention the user request PFC authorization in the front end and back end in order to do these activities. So you should get this particular authorization. Okay. And now for the timesheet, likewise, we have to go to IWFND main service. So this is another T code. So you can just make a note of these T codes. If you're already familiar, it's fine. If not, because these are mandatory things activities which we do on the ongoing basis. So in this case, one is SICF and another is IWFND / maintain services, main service we call it as. So these are the two T codes which we'll use. This is for activating UFI apps, Fiori apps, and this is for activating OData services. Okay. So you can just click exit here, come back /n/. Okay. Authorization is missing. Let me take the shortcut. Okay, I think authorization is missing for accessing this. Okay, let me take another system. Okay. I'll do a quick. I'll just take one more system. So I think in that authorizations are very much limited.
Yeah, I couldn't even get to the system and look at the status of it.
Okay. So because demo system, we I think view only access they can provide, but I think even that is we do not have. One way, other way is also there. Let me try that way. So what we do is we go to that particular transaction, then we'll fetch the services, and then we have to activate the service as well. So once the service is activated, there is one more thing to understand called system alias. So which backend system are we connecting it? So we have to map the system alias as well. So that is very important. So that along with side we have to ensure that there is a trusted RFC connection established, because securely we should be able to configure from the front end and back end. There should be a secure communication happening. So the services, etc., whatever we are accessing. This is optional. Yes, I'm not to. What I'm trying to do is I'm just trying to pick this OData service name used in this particular example
Mm.
to check for that particular components directly. Okay. So this is a service name. Semprod is a OData service. Okay. I'll check for Semprod directly. Even these components also we can directly check here. So if you see, we have so from here also we can do activate, but I just if we have to do two more steps for this one. In the so from the backend system we have to register the service. So like I said, OData service resides in the backend system, but it will be registered on the front end system. Registration we'll do it from IWF and the main service. So from here also we can directly activate the service and we can test the service. When we test the service, it directly opens the OData service URL, and it has to show the JSON in the JSON format or XML format. It has to show all the entities. If you see, this is how the OData service runs. Like it, so it's just similar to how we are using our current during our application design. We are having services, right? So if you see some of the sample services, so this is how we are accessing. So it has to, if you're it is inactivated state. If any OData service, if you see that it is not found or you're not able to access, that means it is not yet activated. So ensure that you activated that node, in particular SSCF node, then you should be able to access the OData service data. If you're not seeing any OData data, then that means it's not activated yet. So it's a simple thumb rule. Okay, now if both are activated, that's how you test it. Okay, so I'll keep this open, and once I have this, show you one. Not sure. So this is about how do we identify. So we just saw, right? So there is how, what does it exactly differ in case of so this, that's it. So if we are activating and managing it, then you are good with this. For standard Fiori apps, there will be nothing more. Only these are the activities. But in case of custom EF application, what if the what are application we have built? So in those cases, there will be lots of changes. So what are the specific changes in this case? So if you see for custom application, we have additional tasks of three more tasks. One is like managing app deployment. So previously, app is already built by SAP, so they have deployed into the SAP environment. So you're finding the application and you're directly searching in the SLCF node and activating the application. But in our case, we haven't yet deployed. So first we have to deploy it. So what are the prerequisite checks? Each application, we have to have one unique identification. So if you see, we do not actually, any application, if you see here, you will not find the application name. If I'm running on the launchpad, manage products, etc. So I had to go to network tab, and then I was actually digging deep to understand what. If you see, there is something called see, in this case, this we call it a semantic object. This says as semantic object. So each application will be masked with a semantic object. So actual application name is different. So in this case, it could be application name could be this, but we'll not show this particular name. We'll show something called semantic object. So uniquely, using this particular semantic object, we can do cross-app navigation as well. What does that mean? So if you are in a approve purchase order, etc., or approve timesheet, So you want to apply yourself, fill the timesheet for yourself. As a manager, you also have to fill your timesheet, right? So you can directly give a button. So on click of it, you can take them back to uh, the employee application specific. So how we do that? Using uniquely, we identify semantic object. So if you pass the semantic object, system will understand that you are referring to employee application and not the approve application. So that's how we have to have additional steps. So for each application, we have to create a semantic object, and semantic objects will be to create a semantic object. We use UI to sem object as a T code. So this is
The
a how
semantic object is a very, uh, I mean, semantic. I don't know. I have to Google and see what it means.
it's like for like unique name we are giving it, that's it. So each application, each action, like what action does it perform. So in this case, if you are approving it, generally we can give semi like manage products, you can give then hyphen, then followed by we can say whether it is a display only action or approve action, etc. So those are
Mm,
like user defined actions. So by
mm,
looking at the object, you'll come to know what kind of activity you can do. It's just like
mm,
masking of the URL. See, if you know the UFA application name, chances are that like if you are having other applications access, you can directly misuse your access, and then you
mm,
can try to exploit the application code, etc. So if you
mm,
are in the public internet, when you're exposing it, if you're masking that particular application name, etc., using some other form, then it actually secures your applications, right? So though you in the front end server you got access, you cannot know unless you know the application name, etc. You cannot actually do anything. Correct.
mm.
So that's
Got it.
how semantic objects protects, like it's like masking of the URL. How you're masking the URL. This case we are masking the application. So
Mm,
though you are on the front end server, you'll not know what is the actual true application name as such. So
mm,
that's the advantage. If you see this says like for to manage it. So if I open one more application, you'll see it different. Now in this case, this is like manage. In case if I select approve purchase order, if you see EPM purchase order, approve it says. So this signifies hyphen afterwards. It displays whether it's a display access, approve access. We can use any word, but
mm,
this particular word, specific word, we create in UI2 um, SEM object. That's a T code where we'll try to give one unique name. And where do we link? This application has to go with this particular semantic object. For that, we have something called Launchpad Designer. So Launchpad Designer is another area where we manage all the standard Fiori apps. So we call something called catalogs and groups. So you saw right here we have some, all these apps are grouped into suppliers and purchasers. So how do we classify them as purchaser and supplier? So this we call it as groups. And all these applications, how do we ship them? So in this case, if you see here, here if you see, this is called as catalog. So under the purchaser, what all apps are there? So this is a catalog, and outside when we saw, these are groups. Okay, all apps again they'll be parent set is catalog. So to manage this particular on the launchpad, we use the launchpad designer. Okay, so we have launchpad URL is always constant. Launchpad designer, you can URL, and so, so you can always go to help.sap.com for any instead of blogs. So this you'll have accurate information. So this is a standard path. Again, all these are again services. If you see launchpad service is also in its same SACF node only it resides. All the services reside in SACF node. And if you activate this particular service, then you can access the admin page of launchpad designer. So what I'll do is I'll just prefix or ESY system port, and then even Launchpad also is one of the service in SACF node. Okay, so I'll bookmark this for so that subsequent times we can open it. So this is a URL. So if you see ADMN, so application service, this is admin is a Launchpad designer service URL. Okay, so we can bookmark this. Let's say bookmark. So it's LPD designer. So this is the tool which we use generally. Instead of going to GUI, we can directly manage everything from here. So these are the, and how do we create the launchpad itself? So if you want, suppose you want different functions are there in your you know, a customer landscape, you wanted to have separate launchpad for each of them. So how do you create that? So for that we can create see this instance you have, right? What if you want to have one more launchpad instance, or what if you want to have different teams are working and you want to have, see, whenever you are making any changes, you should be not messing up with other applications. There could be many teams who might be working on, say, supplier applications. Maybe you are responsible for building it. While purchaser might be some other team might be working all together. So in order to bifurcate the launchpad instances for the development activity, etc., and in order to ship also, so what we use is we use something called launchpad for LPD cust is a T code where we create launchpad instances. So each instance, this is one instance of launchpad Fiori launchpad, and we can create instances using LPD cust. So LPD cust allows us to create launchpad instances. And once if you have PFCG role, this is common for any authorization. In order to do any admin activity, without having a PFC role, we cannot do. So we create a first LPD cast allows us to create that empty shell. So without any apps, if you create an instance, it will have this shell, but it will not have any applications. So this instance itself, to create it, we use LPD cast. Then furtherly, we need to have a higher order called catalog. Then we have in the subsequent order we should have the groups. So once we have the PFC role, we can create catalogs and groups. And where do we create? We create in the Launchpad Designer. So using Launchpad Designer, we can create those catalogs and groups. But to create the Launchpad itself, we have to go to LPD cust. So first step is go and create LPD cust, an instance of Launchpad, then come to Launchpad Designer, and then you can create your catalogs and groups. We'll ease out. So this is for SAP Fiori apps, and that's very simple. But SAP UI5 or custom apps. So what we have is first step is create an instance of Launchpad. So Launchpad we need all users will access from Launchpad, right? But we have to create that in dummy empty shell itself, because always if you see applications we are building it, we are running the application as standalone, but we need a Launchpad to hold those applications. So to create a Launchpad instance, we use LPD cust as a T code. There we create one new Launchpad instance, new instance. Okay. Then comes second step would be, if you have a PFC role provided, you have PFCG role, then you can have access to, you have to log on to LPD Launchpad. LPD, when I say Launchpad short form LPD, I will be using it. So just if I say LPD, that means I'm referring to the Launchpad. So LPD designer we have, this is not a T code, it's a URL. So the moment it loads, this is how it will come. You'll see catalog and groups. So using Launchpad designer URL, so this URL, like I said, you can frame it based on the front end server port, etc. You can frame it. So this will be, in your case, it will be the front end server. So this using this URL, we can create new catalogs, we can create new groups, or we can assign to existing groups and catalog ship to SAP. If you see the information detailed in the standard Fiori apps as well, if you scroll down, they'll give you something called catalog. So this is the catalog name. So if you want to find this application, you'll find in the catalog. And if you want to see specific groups, say they're like classified into three groups. One is like manager apps. All the managers under manager apps, if they want to give, they have kept as catalog as manager catalog, and then they have classified as different roles wise they can ship. So if you have two different roles, if the same application being used by two different roles, certain applications, like in case of sales order, etc., there could be sales representative could be using one role, we might be restricting where certain features might be we wanted to hide certain columns, etc. So we can ship multiple roles as well. In this case we have just one role because manager application is separate, so we have a separate role. But if you take manage my timesheet, etc., you have a different role altogether. So these we call it as catalogs and roles. For in case of standard SAP Fiori, this will be already shipped, so we need not to do anything. Only we have to do the activation part. Whereas for the custom part, we have to create our own catalog. We have to create our own roles. In this case, if you see, this is a catalog for my timesheet, and these are the roles. If you see, they're like we have three different roles. The same application, if employee accesses, this is the role. If a manager accesses, this is the role. And there is one more role where for commercial services, there is one more called project manager. So this is how we can bifurcate based on the role assigned. The app functionality will be suppressed. The same employee, if we employee role if is assigned, you may be restricted only to view only access. Whereas with the manager access, you might actually fill the timesheet for yourself as well as view and approve others records as well. So that's how you'll get access to both applications, etc. in this way. So using roles, we control what kind of features and functionalities can be accessible. To tell you in short, if you have an HR module, okay, and you have 100 apps, all 100 apps are for 100 apps, we create one new catalog saying that these are HR apps. So to identify uniquely, okay. So now a new catalog name we can give HR apps as such, okay, HR business app something. So this will be your catalog, and every catalog will have one unique ID. Now out of 100 apps, you have different teams in you, where one manages team manages payroll management, etc., or one manages hiring activities, and maybe one manages you know um, some other activity, like managing timesheet you can consider or something. So if you have different teams or different departments, then for maybe all 100 apps may not be relevant for all the cases, right? So what we use is we use groups to classify. So for we say for the payroll, maybe 10 applications are relevant, so we group them into one group saying that this is like payroll group, okay. So now in this case, similarly, all are related to approve purchase, but supplier using which supplier uses those they classified as separate. So here you'll say what are relevant apps for supplier case. From purchaser point of view, he needs to have access to shop, so from the shop he'll purchase it. Whereas for supplier, he needs to approve the order, one created by the purchaser. So we can bifurcate and classify those using groups. So now you understood that, right? So in the higher order, all the apps we bunch it in the catalog, whereas groups, using groups, we differentiate. So 50 apps we can keep it for hiring area, for department, etc. So and rest 40 apps could be for managing timesheet, etc. relevant area. So this is just a vague example I'm trying to tell you. So that's how the catalogs or groups plays their role. Now for custom application, we have to ensure that we create this new catalog, etc. Right. So third step would be activating as is, how we have activated it. Apps from SSCF itself, and say same IWFND using it, you will activate OData service as well, custom OData service, whatever we have it. Okay. So here's there like few, and then once these additional activities are done, then we should be good. And second, I'm trying to open because we are having limitations in this ESY system, right? So I'm just trying to.
Yeah, with all this two-factor authentication, you have to have at least 2, 3 devices. Like
Correct.
make a garland of it and then wear it around the neck.
So actually, I just wanted to show in two different, in actual real scenarios, how exactly we have it, etc. Um, so demo system, I'm trying to show you, practically in real world how exactly the things are,
Yeah, that's
and
very helpful.
how exactly we use it. So, but first, in order to understand those, we have to have some basic theory. That's the reason I'm explaining uh,
Yeah, this was actually
what.
very helpful. Gives like a nice overview on what we're about to do, right? I mean, the configuration. So I can always refer back to it in to.
Because we'll not have any step-by-step documentation as such. What is, I mean, what is the
Yeah,
sequence of order to do? So they
yeah.
say these all are instructions, but nowhere they mention that this is a sequence. But understanding which one to do in which order actually simplifies lots of things. Um, Only difference, if you see, creating a launchpad instance, creating a semantic object, and creating group are additional steps for custom application, because we are how to deploy it. So in which catalog we have to deploy, in which group we have to deploy. So we are, in order to specify that, we are actually doing this exercise.
Right.
So if you see now, clicking, see, it's very easy. So if you have existing catalog, now in this case, if you have any SAP ship catalogs, will start with this way, and Z catalogs are starts with what are we created. See here we can directly create. You can click on. You are able to see, right below. There is a plus icon. So we
Mm-hmm.
click on it. Uh, then we then we get the option of standard or or remote systems. Standard means same system. If you are using a different system for hosting this particular front end server. So if your front end server is some remote system, then you have to select remote. Then you have to give the URL of that particular system, etc. Ideally, all these configurations are done on the front end server itself. So the URL which we use is also front end server. Okay. So we just give a name to it. In this case, I say HR catalog. So and then one name we can give. This according to each customer, they'll just follow some name. For anything which we are creating, it has to start with Z. Z. So we say this is a technical catalog. So they call it as technical catalog and business catalog. It's just a difference is like um, if users are super admin, etc. Like within this, you have to add new employee role. So I suppose employee you have to onboard to this particular application, one more application, etc. So like you need some super admin active, right? For that we use technical catalogs. So technical people will have those authorizations. Business people are like end users where they don't see these kind of activities. So like support teams, etc. will use technical catalogs. You are able to understand, right?
Mm-hmm.
So technical catalog, business catalogs again will differentiate, because within these apps, maybe all are not meant for 100 apps, not all are meant for end users itself. Certain are meant for administration. When I say administration, to manage these apps, you might have to create a region, you might have to add new country, etc. Those are not end user. You'll not ask end user to, sir, if India region is not there, add India region all by yourself. You won't say that, right? So
Mm-hmm.
those activities will be done by some support team. So for them, in order to manage it, they use technical catalogs. So technical catalogs are meant for admins, super admins, or who manage those applications, not meant for end users. So one we say business catalog are meant for end users, where it's based on sales representative, or he's an HR manager, etc. So that's the difference between technical catalog and business catalog. If you see these words, they are nothing but they are meant for different ways of organizing the applications. It's just plain way. If you ask me simply, we are giving different names. SAP just complicates the things by naming as technical, non-technical, so lots of other stuff. But basically, all the purpose we do is just a simple catalog you need it, simple group you need it to just build applications in which bucket you want to keep. Always all apps for HR you'll find in catalog, but in the group you will create your own groups. So these all apps where you want to ship it. So now in this case, we wanted to create HR catalog, and here I want to place some 100 apps, all the custom applications built. And then maybe I'll take simple example of here 10 apps, maybe 10 applications where new applications where use cases we are building it. So we have to create a catalog this way, and we'll say HR catalog, any name you can give. It's based on certain users, they'll give you different names. So you can click on save. So then automatically this new catalog will be created, and you'll have this instance. Now you have to select plus, and you have to start creating the tile, etc. So there are like two different tiles. Dynamic tile will show you the count. Now in this case, certain application you might have seen, there is a number like 20, 205. Without going inside, we are able to see how many are yet to be approved. So 20 are need to be approved. Whereas in this case, there is no tile as such. So this we call it as dynamic tile. This we call it as static tile. So dynamic tile, we have to configure the count as well. So let me show you dynamic tile. So that's the additional difference. So now the moment we click on plus icon, this is how it will come. So we can give a nice name for the tile. So in this case, I'll say approve timesheet. So this is our custom application. So we have standard Fiori application. Maybe it did not suit our needs. Okay. What we thought is we'll build ourselves one new timesheet functionality from scratch, everything. Okay, then in this case you'll give your own tile. So when your user uses this particular application, it will not go to standard Fiori App, but it will point to the custom application which we have built. So we are giving approved timesheet as a new name, any name we can give, and we say HR as a any subtitle you can give, and some icon if you want to pick some SAP standard icons. Many icons are available. You can choose any icon of your choice from the list. In this case, I'll just select one icon randomly. And if you see here, you have something called number unit and then service URL. So the URL is nothing but if you have an OData service now, in this case, I'll take any existing service here. So, oops, sorry, this is not the URL. Shopping. So if you have, I have mentioned about queries, right? So if you have, in this case, I think supplier we have, I suppose. Supplier is not it. Let me check. Let me check what it is. The format equal to JSON. So this will give you a lot which all entities are there. This service has suppliers, so I'm just going to suppliers. Okay. So if you have using queries, dollar queries, we have something called dollar count. Okay. If you use dollar count, it will tell you how many entries are there. Okay. So any entity we can use specific queries to filter out. Now supplier, how many entries are there? If you have to find out, there's a query called dollar count. So now if you see, automatically it just gives us the count. So what I can do is I can just copy this URL. So which are entity you wanted to show? Suppose number of approve, how many you have to approve, you say. In this case, suppliers, 10 suppliers I want to show. So I just append dollar count and I'll come to this particular or configuration. Here I'll say the URL. So automatically on the tile, this count will be appeared. You're able to understand how we'll get the count? So now I wanted to have a supplier or approve application. So if this assume this as a timesheet approve. So in that entity, you just have to append dollar count. Then it will give you how many records are there, active records in the table records. So those records we can directly show it as a count. To how do we show? It's a configuration. So how do we configure it? We provide the count URL in the service URL parameter, and when it has to refresh, from 0 to 9 values it supports. If you say every 9 seconds, it will start refreshing it. See, maybe any changes happen, the tile count will automatically refresh every 9 seconds. If you say 0 default interval, it will take. So or I think automatically it will take some random interval as such. So you can give up to 0 to 9 values. It doesn't allow more than that values. I think it allows, but we have to give, we should not give too long. So if it doesn't update, etc., it will be a problem. So generally 0 to 9 is a value we give. So that's how you will define additionally. Now if you see, there is a section called semantic object. So this is where we'll go to, let me, so in this case for your illustration, so this is a front end system, and this is a, so this is a front end system and this is a back end system. Okay, so so you have two different systems in central hub. Okay, and in the front end server,
sorry, there is no specific naming convention, right, for front end and the back end?
and see in the you can name your any system name, etc., but ideally they'll use always in SAP ecosystem the 3-digit server name itself. So each server they'll give one code name. So maybe in your customer landscape they might have different names. These are like short names. So all the technical people, they use this word. They'll not use the front end system, back end system, because they'll have. If you see here, we have
At least
thousands of.
if they can say, you know, all the head series is like the front end and all the, you know, B series or something, it would have been easier.
That convention they won't follow. If you see typically in a customer landscape, or any customer landscape, see this is just for one European region. You have lots of systems. Okay, there are like thousands of systems will be there. Maybe for the front end system could be for Europe region could be different. For India region could be different. Okay, if their data privacy law states that you cannot access the data from other regions, then you have to maintain the region's specific data. So all your data, business data, should reside in Europe itself. So then you have a separate SAP server. You're understanding, right? So you generally these are like you can follow. I'm not saying you should not follow or anything. They can give the names, but you'll have lots of systems in ideal's case. You'll not have
Okay.
just one system. Okay.
Thank you.
So generally the notation they follow is a single three-digit number they follow. But as a developer, you'll know which is your front-end system, which is your backend. If you don't know that, then you have to on the first day of your onboarding, you have to ask them who are in your team, boss, which is my front-end system, which is that. Then going forward, you can start understanding.
Yeah.
Okay, this is the system you have to use. So that is one. You can edit and you can rename it. So if you want to rename it, so if they are not meeting also, you can rename it as whatever name you want.
Right.
So this is my Fiori, front end system. It's up to you. So it's always it all system needs is a server. Which server I have to hit? Okay,
Yes.
which server I have to hit? What is your credentials? So as long as your credentials and server access you have, you're good to have with any name. Okay.
Got
So we have in this case, I have multiple system. I'm just trying to second, check. Problem is we have lots of systems and we generally do not remember.
Yeah, I mean, we don't even remember our phone passwords oftentimes, email.
Correct. So we always have see all your systems will look the same. So it all depends on what authorization you have. That's it. Every SAP GUI looks this way same. So like I said, first you have to go and see based on the theme. See the maybe the one with ESY was the different theme. See, but technically all refer to the same system. Don't think that this is a different system. So if you see here, it shows as HDB. That means it's HANA database. And product versions, if you see in the real system, you'll have lots of components. So here you see GRC is enabled. So this is how SAP ABAP for S4HANA, Fiori for S4HANA. This is a front-end server component. So we have 1809 and then Fiori front-end server 5.0. You're getting it right. So this is how we have the components, and
Mhm.
I'll just show you. We are not able to see SSCF. We are able to see, but we are not able to see able to maintain service, right?
Mm.
So activate and maintain service. So this is how the all the services. These are all OData services. If you see, there are like lots of OData service out there. Okay. So if you want to add a new service or you want to add a service, so these services will be available in our backend system. So technically you have to go there and you have to search. Now what I'm trying to do is we have the OData service in the backend system. Now we have to fetch that service from the backend system and register on the FPS. If you show pictorially, you can relate it. See, in real world, you'll not have the structure what we see. Okay. So if you see, the OData service resides in the backend system, right? So
Mm.
only our front-end server will have Fiori apps. But the gateway add-on, what we do is, in order to secure our application, the business data, what we do is, we will not directly, always will not access services from the backend. The backend service will register it on the front end. So OData services are registered on the front end. So how do we do that registration? So that step we are now trying to see. You're getting it right.
Yeah.
So UFI app, we had directly went to SSCF. The same SSCF, if you go to backend system, you'll not find any Fiori apps. You'll find
Mm.
only OData services. Okay.
Mm.
So why is that? Because all OData services lies in the backend. Because the business data lies in the backend system, not on the front end system. Both will have HANA database, but in the HANA database in the front end system, you'll have only apps. The business data will not be there. Whereas in the
Mm.
backend system, you'll have S4 HANA system, but the backend business data resides here. So our
Mm.
OData service also resides there only. But what we
Mhm.
do is, in order to access it from the front end system, we have to tell that, boss, this application has to use this particular OData service, and you have to, register that particular service in the front end system. So that activity we are trying to do. So we have done this part of activating. Now we are trying to activate OData service. So technically, if you have to activate, you have to go to SSCF in backend system and directly activate. Okay.
So how about that SCGW transaction code?
That is meant for creating new OData services.
Oh, okay, got it.
Okay. SCJW is allows you to create now custom applications. How you're building new UF application, you have to build new OData service. Okay, so
Mm.
SCJW allows you to create new OData service. This is meant for once already created using SCJW. Now, how do you deploy it onto front end or back end system? So we are seeing the deployment of OData service now. Clear?
Got it. Thank you.
Now in the system now, how do we do that activities? I'm just trying to show you. So in the system, you'll find all the services. Now, first time when we actually have to add it, so you click on add service, then you'll use something called system alias. System alias is nothing but it'll tell you what is your backend system. In this case, this is BS. This is a backend system. So GPD is my backend system, or maybe any other system. So I now I'll say from this system, my OData services are in this system. So go and establish a connection to that particular system and try to fetch this particular service name. Now in this case, I'll just try for any Jet Star. Um, so if you have full OData service, you have to give this particular service name, and then you have to search the application. So if you search for it, the services here are all featured from this backend system. These are not available on your front end system. Remember, when you say system alias, that means you're connecting to a remote system, some your backend system. So if you have here in this diagram which we saw, now when I give system alias as in our case, it could be some GPD or GPD system, and this is our HFT system. From in HFT, we have given system alias as go and hit HGD and fetch all the services. Now, when I give HGD, it will fetch all the services. Now, I gave as this is my backend server, then it fetched all the services. So, in this case, if you see all the G are created using SCJW itself. So, some of the teams they might have used and they for their own use cases and they have created it. So now you have to select this particular service and you have to select add selected service. This step, what it will do is it will add and register on your front end server. Then when you check in IWFND main service, so it will ask you to give under which package you want to give. For every development object, we create for some package. So if you do not have, you can create some local object and then you can create it. Okay. So it will ask for a transport. So I think you are familiar with transport. So these all comes under customizing transport. So because your configurations. So for applications which we are building UF applications, that will be workbench request. So, but whenever we are making any changes in the system, so now we are making change in the system, right? So we are registering one service from the back, and we are every time when we call the service, it automatically goes and hits the backend system because we have registered that in such a way that this service when I'm calling from the front end system, that means from the browser when I hit this application should internally go and check for BES system which are attached in the system alias. So that's how it will understand now. Now we establish that connection now. Now you come back to this.
And the transport is going to reside in this one, right? If we go to the SC09, we'll be able to see that.
Yes, yes, yes. So the transport lies here. Now, if you want to move to quality, now you have to just, you need not to redo this all activities. Just you'll move the transport. Same system alias, etc. Everything would be automatically available in your quality landscape. Just it will be moved on to production. That's it. So every time when you're doing an activity, ensure that you have your transport available. So good question you have asked. So let me show you. So the same applicable to even the configuration which you're doing. If you see here, you have to select the settings. Let me show you one more instance. Just a moment. So. See, an ideal world in customer case, you'll have lots of systems, and you should not actually worry about all the systems. As a front end, whenever we are dealing with front end, for us all it matters is only the front end system. So it could have hundreds of backend systems because each module have separate backend system. Business data never lies in single system. If you have HR specific, business data will be very securely they'll host in one separate SAP server that they give some name. Now in this case, it could be HFT, HSC, some other name. Okay. What I'm trying to say is in real world, you'll not have just one system. Whenever we speak, we just say one system. But in real world, businesses data is very huge. The key is database. The backend system should be secured, very much highly secure. It should to be there,
Mm.
because though you're exposing one application, if that one application leads to access to all the data behind, that means whole your business is gone. See,
Mm.
assume that there is some confidential information which says that if I delete your whole payroll data, what happens? Your company is
You
gone.
you are fired first, and then your companies.
So the cascading effect is very high. That's the reason we are adding layers. If you see, technically it can be done in single system. Now you're introducing one layer called authentication, single sign-on, right? On the browser, if you're accessing it in this case, so you're accessing on the browser. I think what cursor, it's not even, yeah. So on the browser, when we're accessing, we are using single sign-on. Then it authenticates. Further, you have Launchpad. In that, you have roles called catalogs and groups. So you have those roles, then you'll be able to access these particular applications. Correct.
Mm.
So you're adding one layer of security. Then you have something called front-end system. So within the front-end system, again, you are saying that all your business data lies in different system. So you should have your SAP ID on front-end system, and you should have your SAP ID available on your back-end system, and you should have an authorization as well for each of the for application as well as for the OData service. If you
Mm.
see, there are like lots of checks. These all are authorization handling itself. These all activities what we are doing are why we are using the process to establish authorization controls. If you see, indirectly we are setting up all the authorizations restrictions. See,
Mm.
the activities so far what we are trying to do. So creating a catalog, etc. These all are part of. See, if you have access to, if I give access to supplier, that means I'm, you're just confined to 10 apps. You're not accessing 90 apps. That means I'm protecting 90 apps from unwanted access to this particular user. Maybe there could be a hacker who might be got exposed to access to this particular 10 apps. Then only the 10 apps would be, you'll have access. You cannot access 90 apps. Correct.
Mm.
So that's how this inbuilt layers of, we are adding the layers of security in terms of catalogs, groups, OData service, backend system, front end system, and have respect
Mm.
to checks as such. So even for while creating, if you see in a ESP system, I could not do anything because it asks for T code also. It asks, so to view the data also, it asks me, do you have authorization or not? You're
Mm.
understanding, right?
Right.
So each activity to do, you should have an authorization, and even in that also, if you want to activate a service, you have to access. Deactivate, you have to
I
have
think
access.
basis guys business is gonna go up.
True.
Configurers are not so much.
These all generally basis will do. These are like if you should know that you have to give this particular author, and that's it. So generally these all you need not to worry.
Mm.
If you are as a Fiori, as you are managing the Fiori ecosystem, by default you'll have all the authorization. So now right now in the system when I do for the client scenario, in this case when I'm trying to show you, I have all the roles which are necessary for my job. Okay, we need not
Mm.
ask them that I'm not having this role, etc.
Mm.
So those change generally well-established organizations will have all those things available. We need not to actually go into that. Maybe for the first time when you need access to front-end system, you might have to raise a request. That when you're raising a request, the authorization team who is managing the system will ensure that you have all the roles necessary for doing your job.
And a quick question. So if let's say I came into this transaction screen directly, and then I wanted to like track my way back, right? To see which this technical service, which system it's connected to. So is there a way to like double click somewhere and see it? Like,
Yeah, see catalog etc. For standard Fury apps, you'll come to know because you can filter based on uh, roles also. So if you see on the home page here, you have option to filter based on roles, etc. So or based on catalogs, etc. So you if you have the catalog, etc. Then from here you have to check it out. Not in the system. In the
mm,
system you'll not have because it's always in the T code. You have to go to SSCF node and you have to go to that path to see what all applications are active, etc. So that is
mm,
very tough to do. So but if you come here, you have various ways of checking it. In this case, if you see catalog, so if you know the catalog name, you can check here based on catalog. Okay, so what all apps are available to you? So suppose you already are accessing from the Launchpad designer, you came to know that this is a catalog ID. So you can copy this catalog ID. So this is SAP standard catalog ID. You can come here and you can search for this catalog. So if you see, these all are catalogs shipped. So various apps, etc. So you can filter based on the catalog here. So then you'll come to know.
What I was trying to like kind of understand was that, let's say if somebody has done like a Z service there, right? Added, in other configuration tables, we will see some history, right? Like who did that and that. I was just trying to see if in that transaction screen we had IWFND. Is there a way to see who
Yes,
added
yes.
that Z?
Yes.
Because
All
I
the
think
informations in any system you'll have. I think here they may not have the field.
because in
Generally,
my system,
who modified, etc. Everything you'll have all the details as well. You'll have.
Is my system, I was trying to find out something like a Z service that got added recently and who did that, but I
Yeah, you
couldn't
can.
find exactly who did that.
One way is you can go to SC80 and then you can check who last modified that particular package, etc. Now while registering, you created package, right? So in this
Mm,
case, you'll have a package name. So if anyone has made a change either by package name or if you have application, if you are trying to see, you can check for BSP application and you can directly check for that particular application name. In this case, I can type for G star and I can check for. I mean, there are many ways. I'm not saying that there is a single way as such,
mhm,
but if you say in this case there is this package here, so all the BSP applications are there. If I know any specific application, I can select this particular application and I can see that okay, it was modified by me. See, if you see
mm,
this is the name, so we
mm,
can check
got
and I mean if you know, you should know some details. If you know package name, you know application name.
mm,
So if you know application name, you select BSP application, search by application name. You know
mm,
catalog name, go search by catalog name. But you should have some any of this. In this case,
mm,
you have lots of other ways of whether you know the package name or whether you know the function module or whether you have any
mm.
other option as such. So this is one way to identify. This is not the only way. There are like standard tables as well. There could be some standard table name as well. I'm not familiar.
Mm.
Where I mean, we have lots of
Not in
transactions.
that screen, right, where we were a while ago, like that IFWND. In that screen, we can't see anything, right?
I think there I have. I'm not sure. Um,
Yeah,
there
like
could be
in the
other
sales
fields we
side,
might
right?
have. I haven't seen a specific request stats. Let me see if we have anything here.
Yeah.
Service name. Backend. So I will select one
Now I
application.
know, that SCAT was very helpful. Um, if we have some idea, I mean, I can search with Z packages and at least see that way. So,
See, I think here they gave user ID. So if you see, I think for this information nobody modified. See, you have to select the service and you have to see request status. Then you have user ID, date and time, when modified, etc. Okay.
mm,
So
got
you
it.
have this information. So I mean, these are like if you want in SAP, almost any transaction, if anybody is doing, nobody can escape. It will be captured one place or the other place. Okay, who is messing up data? Finding it is very easy in SAP. It's only like we may not be using. See, I may not actually use this. That's why I haven't seen it. Generally, you'll have options for any table or anywhere whenever you're making change.
Mm,
Everything will be captured. So now coming back to our scenario, so now we understood certain parts. So let me, okay, I think this, I'll summarize this once. So here, now we added a service, right? So if you see here, you'll have option to activate on the ICF node. If you click activate, deactivate, etc. Okay. So you have to click on activate, and if it turns to green, that means it is active. Okay, service is active. And if you click on this service, so it will show you, if you click on the service, it will show you system alias. That means this service is going and hitting this particular backend system. Okay, so if you want to change tomorrow, if your customer asks, uh, you know currently or says business data in the mock system, you have to copy a system. Not really. Maybe your production system, you have two instances, Europe region and US region, and you wanted to have your application access instead of Europe region, you wanted to change the data in your application to be visible from the US region. Then all you have to do is you have to add a system alias and you can have to add that particular backend system. So your business data completely unplugged and it got changed to US region. Your application still lies in the FES itself, But the business data, which is appearing on your application, changes based on the backend system you are connecting it. You getting it right?
Yeah.
So we have applications. Our application always will be one single. You will always have application instance will be one, but the backend tables or backend data, business data resides. It can reside on any system. So if you want to use all, globally, if you are having one single system which has all the global data, then you can link that particular system, or whichever backend you wanted to consume the data. We specify using this particular system alias itself, right? So this is how we have, and if you see now back again, the architecture, we have covered all the components. So we saw for standard Fiori as well, this one. So how do we register, etc. And we have seen each components individually. And for this part, IWFND main service. For this part, SSCF is a T code. And all activities you do it on the front end itself, not on the back end. We do all the things on the front end itself. So this is how we have connected and established the connection to SAP backend. Clear?
Got it.
So this is how I think. One more, I'll just let me. I think I have this will complete so that we'll complete this session. So you'll not have any theory because these are like conversations, nothing to code as such. But you should have to know that each activity how to do and where to do exactly. Okay. So I was talking about catalogs, right?
Mm.
So the same will be repeated now. New catalog when you are creating here, like transport, you have to before doing any config changes, you have to ensure that you created a customized request. So in SA09, if you created a customized request, it will automatically appear in this drop down. Okay.
Mm.
If it doesn't appear, you create the request and just reload this, then automatically the request which are created on your ID will be appearing here. If it is not appearing,
Mm.
then don't do the configuration changes because it will not be captured. See,
Mm. Got it.
ultimately, your problem is you cannot retrack. Like you have to redo all the activities. If you miss any activity, they'll be failed to capture in your transport. So first
Mm.
activity, always go create a customized request, then assign the request, then start doing the activities. Okay.
Got it.
So be it in you're doing in GUI or in Launchpad Designer, anywhere customizing in the sense we are creating tiles, we are modifying tiles, creating semantic objects, anything. All are configurations. Configuration, customizing request. You're creating new application, transport request should be there, and you have to assign first thing for on-premise. Okay. Now we created one catalog. Let me go back to that catalog. HZ. I think name we have given G underscore TC something I have given. It's fine. Uh, I think. Oh, sorry. I think looking in. This is a. We are created in here. This is a different system and this is a different launchpad. Okay. For to show you, this is a ESV system where we are trying to create,
Yeah.
right?
Okay.
So
So
I'm looking at a
similarities.
long system. That's the reason you have to be careful. So we were creating here. So here, what we are trying to do is now, we create a catalog and we are creating dynamic tile. Okay, so here I gave a name and this is how we'll configure the count and we have it. Now comes the semantic object. For doing semantic object, what I do is I go back to my system. So I'll go to UI to sem object slash UI to slash sem. These some keywords you have to remember or you have to either add as a transactions here. Okay. And okay, let me short that I have it. T code is right. Okay, there is no hyphen. You have to give a sem obj. So I was trying sem hyphen, right? So just use UI to sem obj. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the T code for semantic object. So here what we do is we just create semantic objects. So semantic objects are nothing but just masking the URL I said, right? So you create a new entry and you generally you can give the same name. So at all the places you can just give object and object name both you can keep the same name, any z name. If you are using now approve purchase order, z approve purchase order, you can give any name you can give. There is no rule as such. You can describe what that object. So for you to refer, if you go back to system, you have to identify what this semantic object does exactly. So you can give a description of it. That's it. Nothing more. This you will use only for the masking purpose. You come here, you create a Z. Now I created for suppose we create a new entry called Z approve timesheet. So I'll create a new entry here. And again, this also you have to make sure that you are using a customizing transport request, etc. Whenever it prompts, whenever make a change, it will prompt. So we have to make sure. Once you save this in a transport, then when you come here, you can search in this list. All your semantic objects will appear here. Now, suppose for a approved purchase order, if I created anything, so I can search for any Z. I'm not sure in anything we have here. So in this case, the semantic objects will appear here technically. So once we go there, we create semantic objects will appear. Suppose we created it. So we create only semantic object. Action part we won't create. We'll directly choose any value. So by default, SAP gives some actions, display, approve, etc. So you can just select any action based on the action you're doing. Suppose you want to say approve kind of thing, you can use. This has no significance. This is just for differentiating. Suppose in the same application, you want to have two roles. One will use display only access and one will use approve functionality. You're getting it right. Same application, we can ship three roles. Some users can have certain feature access, certain users will hide those fields. So using action, we can differentiate which activities to enable and which activities to disable. So that's how the action part comes into picture. And then if any parameters like auto populate, you want to auto populate certain fields, we can pass the parameters here as well. Suppose in the GIT code or any application, we want to auto populate values. If you specify the parameters here, it will auto populate. And that's it.
Like default values, right?
Yes, correct. So once we save this, our tile instance will be created and then we are good. So now we got our tile. Now here one more activity we have to do. Now we created our tile, etc. Now we have something called target mapping. So target mapping is the place where we'll specify some more additional details. Now which launchpad I have to place this tile in. Suppose you have different teams, I said, right? Right now we have created directly up, we have application, we created tile and catalog, but we haven't placed this tile and catalog in any launchpad. We have to place them in one launchpad, right? So our catalogs and groups. So where do we place it? So that information will give in target mapping. So boss, we have a semantic object now. So this is the application. So uniquely using this particular semantic object, we are able to identify which application is it, correct? Now this application, whether you want to restrict this application to access. Now here we say certain applications are restricted, standard application to only desktop, etc. How do we restrict? From here we'll restrict. So here you specify, you uncheck for desktop. This is meant for only tablet and phone. You restrict it. It just supports only in this landscape. So you know for what kind of use case you have built, right? So accordingly, you can control the access from admin page. Okay. And the parameters, like I said, you can add, here directly parameters. So suppose certain parameters auto populate you want to do directly, you can list any number of parameters here, and default value you can set, and those will be auto populated when application loads. You click on the tile, you go inside. If you specify a list of parameters, automatically they'll auto populate there in the application. Suppose by default, when you're logging in, you want your what do we say, for order number, etc. to be auto populated, then you can pretty much give the order number, etc. values, etc. Suppose always you are running for specific T code, some department code, etc. You can give the default value. So the only those department records will be shown, the data will be shown to you. So this is how we can configure specific parameters, the dynamic tile, and restriction of whether mobile or etc. And like I said in the previous yesterday's discussion, not all Fiori apps might be available. We might have certain T codes. See, now we have FAR using recommendation report. We identified SAP has suggested out of 400 and 500 T codes, 100 we have Fiori apps. So rest of 400 also we have to provide access, right? So how do you provide this? Using this configuration. Here you'll specify whether it's a transaction T code, whether it's a UF application, or whether it's a web info application. Or if you have any URL, non-SAP transaction, you want to give it as a tile, you can very much